Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to what promises to be a brawl more engaging than a debate on whether chicken salad belongs in a sandwich. Tonight, we take a swing at the behemoth of sitcom history, Seinfeld.
Well, Bob, considering how most television comedy was as predictable as my aunt's meatloaf recipe, Seinfeld came in and tossed the script out the window, didn't it?
Predictable? Heck, television was so sanitized, I'm surprised the characters didn't wash their hands before saying their lines. Seinfeld didn't just toss the script out, it rewrote the darn rule book.
You got that right. It was like suddenly finding out your straight-A student's been skipping school. Seinfeld skipped all the norms and still graduated with honors.
Oh, and let's not forget its legacy. Seinfeld was the jazz of comedy, hoping you catch the rhythm, but if you don't, the joke's on you. Doobie-doobie-doo.
Speaking of jazz, watching Seinfeld was like listening to a man who knew how to play the kazoo, but chose silence instead. It was about nothing, but that nothing sure made a lot of noise, didn't it?
Exactly, Groucho. Now, simmer down, folks. We have a long night ahead. It's not just about reflecting on Seinfeld's divine comedy. We're here to dissect its guts, analyze its DNA, and maybe, just maybe, understand why we're still talking about a show about nothing. Let's dive right in. Seinfeld, it broke the mold of traditional sitcoms. Before this, we were fed a steady diet of laugh tracks and happy endings. George, how do you reckon Seinfeld shook things up?
You know, Bob, sitcoms used to serve us life with a side of sugar, pretending everything's just peachy. Seinfeld dared to show life's mundane absurdity, no sugarcoating, just a bold face to the everyday grind. It's like comedy decided to finally tell the truth.
Truth? Man, it was more like looking in a mirror and seeing the weird facial hair you're trying to grow. Seinfeld made it okay to be awkward, to screw up. It was raw, man, raw like the emotions we all try to hide.
And let's not forget the brilliance of turning nothing into something. Who else could take waiting for a table and turn it into a saga? It's like watching paint dry, but if the paint were voiced by Mel Blanc.
Absolutely, dear. And let's talk about the innovation here. You don't see that kind of bravery in television much. Most shows were too scared to step outside those neatly sketched lines. Seinfeld danced all over the lines and made its own.
Innovation? Bah. It was anarchy. They took the rule book, threw it out the window, and made a show about searching for the rule book. Except, plot twist, there never was a rule book.
And the characters talk about a departure from the norm. Here were people consumed by life's trivialities, yet we saw ourselves in them, as frightening as that might seem.
Selfish, neurotic, obsessed with the insignificant. Yeah, they were relatable because they were real. Not these cardboard cutouts we'd been fed for years.
Speaking of real, you ever notice how life seems to imitate Seinfeld? I mean, you get stuck in a parking garage and suddenly you're in an episode. Life didn't imitate art. Art got there first.
It was a reflection, darlings. The genius of Seinfeld wasn't just in making us laugh, but in holding up a mirror to the nonsensical parts of life we all experience. And that's a kind of bravery we hadn't quite seen before in sitcoms.
Oh, please, bravery? They were four neurotics living in New York. You throw a stone, you hit a neurotic. But sure, let's call it bravery, because they made it funny.
It seems clear, then, that Seinfeld redefined the borders of comedy, moving us from neatly packaged lifelines to celebrating the absurdities of the everyday. Would you agree that it's more reflective of real life than its predecessors?
Definitely, Bob. It didn't pretend life was anything but a series of awkward, often meaningless encounters. That's the truth, and truth is the core of comedy.
And man, didn't it just make you feel a bit better about your own mess? Seinfeld was like, it's okay, your life's a joke, and that's fine.
In fact, it's more than fine. It's hilarious. Embrace the chaos of your existence, and perhaps throw in a slap bass while you're at it.
Each episode was a little lesson in not taking ourselves too seriously, something we could all stand to remember.
Lessons? The only lesson I learned was that if I ever got caught master of my domain, I should have a clever quip ready.
All right, let's dive into this show about nothing concept. Is Seinfeld really a show about nothing, or is there more beneath the surface? Groucho, kick us off.
A show about nothing? please. I've had more nothing happen to me on the way here than in any Seinfeld episode. The show is about everything, from the frustration of losing your car in a parking garage to the absurdity of soup Nazism. If you think it's about nothing, then you're not paying attention.
Well, Groucho, I must say, the idea gave the writers a lot of creative freedom. Imagine pitching a show today where the whole episode is about waiting for a table. It's genius in its simplicity, but only because it's rooted in the daily trivialities that everyone can relate to.
Creative freedom? It was a reflection of life. Life is mostly about waiting around for something to happen. Seinfeld just had the guts to show it like it is, a series of mundane events that somehow end up being hilarious.
Yeah, but you gotta wonder, could a show about nothing happen outside of New York City? That city made the nothing seem like something.
Exactly, Richard. New York City, with its fast-paced life and quirky characters, is the perfect backdrop for a show about daily minutiae. It's the bowl of soup with a side of neurosis for every meal.
You think they could pull off an episode about waiting for a table in Omaha? The setting matters, but it's the characters who live those moments that make or break the concept.
It's existential, really. We're all just moving from one nothing moment to the next, hoping to find some something in it. Seinfeld just puts a magnifying glass to it.
But let me throw this out there. Doesn't the reliance on New York City pigeonhole the broader universality of the show?
Not at all, Lucille. New York is just the stage, but the play is about human nature. We all deal with the trivial, the mundane, everywhere.
And in that triviality, my friends, lies the genius of Seinfeld. It's about nothing, sure, but that nothing is something we all experience. It's comedy gold.
Comedy gold or not, the beauty of Seinfeld lies in making us care deeply about the everyday nothings. Only in a world so absurd could nothing really mean something.
Quite the philosophical turn on the show about nothing. It's clear Seinfeld carved out its unique space by embracing the ordinary and proving that within the nothing, there's a world of something for those willing to look. All right, folks, let's dive into the juicy center of our Seinfeld cake, the character dynamics. Jerry and George's friendship, how do you think it influenced today's TV buddy systems?
You look at Jerry and George, and what do you see? A reflection of us at our most pathetic, sitting on a couch, dissecting the minutiae of life because we can't handle the big stuff. Modern shows owe their realism to this. No heroes, just two schmucks making us feel better about our own mundane lives.
Absolutely. But let's not forget the energy, the pure chaotic good of bouncing off each other's neuroses. It's like ping pong at the Mad Hatter's Tea Party. Today's shows, they're standing on the shoulders of neurotic giants, flinging their own verbal volleys back and forth.
And Elaine, don't get me started on the powerhouse that is Elaine Beniz. She walked so today's TV women could run, with scissors, mind you. Sharp, funny, unapologetically herself. Her dynamic with the group, it wasn't just about the laughs, it was a statement.
Statement, schmatement. Every time those characters opened their mouths, you'd think philosophy was being made. But in reality, they were just clearing the air for more nonsense. Nonetheless, you've got to admire the craft. It's like they were playing 3D chess with social norms while everyone else was still stuck playing checkers. You got that right, but let's not gloss over the dark side, huh? That selfishness, it was revolutionary, man. Showed us all our true colors, didn't it? Like holding up a mirror and not liking the reflection, but laughing at it anyway.
Right. They were selfish, neurotic, and inescapably human. And what does modern TV do? It sanitizes, moralizes, and often forgets the core of what Seinfeld showed us. Humanity in its absurd, glorious mess.
Except maybe they miss that glorious mess of laying bare the soul, revealing that, yes, we are all just as messed up, lost, and hilariously flawed as Jerry, George, Elaine, and Kramer. That's the legacy, the beautiful, unvarnished truth of us.
Somehow, amidst all that selfishness and mess, they gave us a comedy that was incredibly smart about nothing and everything. And today, we need that cleverness, that glimpse into the absurdity of the everyday more than ever.
Nonetheless, despite the cynicism, the chaos, the comedy, it all boils down to one thing: entertainment. And in that, Seinfeld was king. Today's shows could learn a thing or two about keeping the audience laughing while peering into the abyss.
Well, it sounds like the consensus here is that Seinfeld, in its exploration of character dynamics, selfishness, and societal norms, not only reshaped comedy, but also presented a mirror to our collective faces, a mirror we're still using to scrutinize ourselves today. Let's see where that reflection takes us next in the world of television. Keep those laughs coming, and maybe, just maybe, we'll find some answers hidden in the questions Seinfeld dared to ask. Let's dive into no hugging, no learning. Seinfeld's stance on morality, or rather, its artful dodge of it. Groucho, does the lack of moral resolution make the show a cynic's playground?
Well, if cynicism is questioning motives, then Seinfeld is the Supreme Court of sitcoms. The beauty lies in its refusal to preach. After all, the only real lesson learned in a 22-minute sitcom is how quickly time flies when you're forced to watch commercials. It reflects life itself, a series of events without moral handholding.
Exactly, Groucho. It's about the absurdity of expecting life to teach us neat little lessons. Real life isn't about learning not to lie because it's wrong. It's about learning to lie better so you don't get caught. Seinfeld gets that. It strips away the saccharine moralizing and presents the raw, unpolished truth. We're all selfish, and that's okay.
But don't you think that's a bit too cynical? There has to be a balance. Comedy can be a powerful tool for highlighting flaws, yes, but it can also inspire change, can't it?
Change? In Seinfeld? The whole point is that people don't change, they don't learn. And that's the joke. It's a mirror up to society, showing us we're not as evolved as we think. We're laughing because it's true, and sometimes the truth hurts.
And therein lies the genius. It's the celebration of the nothing that's everything. No heavy-handed morals, no after-school special wrap-ups. It's about finding the humor in the mundane, the everyday selfishness and pettiness without trying to fix it.
Precisely, my rapid-fire friend. Trying to inject a morality tale into something as inherently immoral as day-to-day life is like trying to teach a dog to solve algebra. Why bother? The fun is in the chaos, not in the order.
Let's not forget, it challenged the audience to think for themselves rather than being spoon-fed a moral conclusion. That's the true essence of comedy, making you think while making you laugh.
And yet, the question remains for the culture today, is this no lessons learned approach sustainable, or has society shifted too far into requiring a moral to every story?
Perhaps it isn't about what's sustainable, but what's honest. Seinfeld chose honesty over comfort, and that's why it's a gem.
Yeah, it reflects the sheer complexity of being human. You can't simplify that down to a moral at the end of every episode.
And thank goodness. Imagine the alternative, a world where every conversation teaches you something profound. Exhausting, isn't it? Better to laugh at our follies than preach about virtues we hardly follow.
Insightful, as always. It seems our consensus leans towards the appreciation of Seinfeld's brilliance in avoiding the trite and embracing the authentically flawed human experience. All right, folks, let's dive into how New York City isn't just a backdrop in Seinfeld, but a character in its own right. George, you've surely noticed the quirks and twists of the Big Apple in the show?
You kidding me? New York is the breeding ground for the absurd. Every nook and cranny of that city is a comedy bit waiting to happen. Seinfeld just held up a mirror to it. It's where you can find a soup guy turning hungry customers away like he's the gatekeeper to paradise.
Absolutely. But filming a New York show in Los Angeles? Oh, that's a hoot. It's like trying to convince a New Yorker that LA pizza is just as good. It creates this fantastical version of New York, cleaner, but without losing its edge.
Clean New York? I must have watched a different program. Every episode dripping with city life's cynicism and charm. They even made parking an existential crisis.
Speaking of existential, remember the parking garage? Lost, wandering, a microcosm of life. New York's vastness turns mundane into an adventure. That lost in a parking garage is an allegory for life in the city, always searching, rarely finding.
And isn't it poetic? We're talking about a city where people pride themselves on never getting lost, yet here are our heroes, perpetually bewildered by parking spaces.
New York's like that funny uncle who's slightly annoying, but makes family gatherings worth it. Seinfeld wouldn't sing the way it does if it was set anywhere else. That city, man, it's got layers, like an ogre or one of those onions.
Layers? Sure. But let's talk logistics. Recreating those NY vibes in LA, that's a testament to the creative genius. The city's energy, the impatience, it all had to be meticulously crafted. It made the absurdity more authentic.
Authenticity in Seinfeld? The only thing authentic about it was its commitment to showing the ridiculousness of social mores. New York City wasn't just a setting, it was the anvil on which the comedy was hammered out.
An anvil. Yes, and each character, a blacksmith of comedy, shaping the mundane into hysterical slices of life against the mighty backdrop of New York City, the forge of absurdity.
Well, it seems we can agree. New York City's essence is as much a protagonist in Seinfeld as Jerry, Elaine, George, and Kramer. Its influence is undeniable, from the chaos of city life to the peculiarities of its inhabitants. Let's dive into the unsung heroes of Seinfeld, the secondary characters. Would the show really be the same without Newman or the soup Nazi?
Newman, what a character. Shakespeare would have killed to write a character like him. The man's a human thunderstorm, always ready to rain on Jerry's parade. A delightful menace, I say.
And don't forget about the soup Nazi. Without these characters, Seinfeld would be like a sandwich without the meat. Still good, but missing the flavor. These folks added depth and spice to the show, making the mundane magnificent.
Man, those characters, they were like the spices in the cabinet. Not the main dish, but, they make the dish. Like the soup Nazi, that wasn't just about soup. It was about life, authority, and how we deal with it.
It's the absurdity of these characters that reflects reality. The soup Nazi, Newman, they're caricatures of people we've all dealt with. They turned the mirror on society and showed us how ridiculous we can all be.
And the brilliance is how they're woven into the fabric of the everyday. You've got a guy who won't serve you soup, another who lives to torment his neighbor. It's like, what planet do these people come from? Earth, actually. Unfortunately.
Enough about the soup Nazi. Let's talk Newman. He's like that little voice inside your head, but on the outside. Tells you exactly what you don't want to hear.
These characters, they brought something special. They were the colorful threads in the dull gray fabric of our daily lives, turning ordinary moments into extraordinary memories.
But let's not romanticize them too much. They were brilliantly written foils to the main characters, yes, but they also represent the everyday absurdities that George Carlin here loves to talk about. Life's a circus, and these characters were the clowns.
And at the end of the day, ain't it the truth that we all got a little soup Nazi in us? A little Newman, maybe? Shows like Seinfeld hold up a mirror, folks. Might not always like what we see.
Sounds like the consensus here is that the secondary characters were crucial in making Seinfeld the landmark show it was, giving it a depth and texture that's unmatched. They were the spice in the Seinfeld gumbo. Jumping right in, let's dissect The Contest, arguably one of the most audacious episodes in television history.
Audacious. It was revolutionary. It tackled a subject everyone does but no one talked about on TV. It's like saying what everyone is thinking but pretending they're not.
Without saying it, it was the ultimate game of charades. Master of your domain becomes this era's catchphrase without ever crossing the line. Genius.
Honestly, I was astounded they got it past the censors. Back in my day, we couldn't even say pregnant on TV.
It's all about subtlety, Lucille. Back then, we couldn't say pregnant, and suddenly you're not the master of your domain on prime time. Society's curtain got yanked open. That episode didn't just push the envelope, it mailed it to a whole new address. Broke down barriers without getting too graphic.
And then there's the soup Nazi, a prime example of authoritarianism served up in a soup bowl. No soup for you is a simple sentence that spoke volumes about control and the human condition.
Absolutely. It showed that power can come from the most unexpected places, even a soup stand. And the way we submit to authority for the sake of comfort or routine, it's like we're all standing in line waiting to be denied our soup.
It wasn't just about soup or control, it was about character. Each person's response to the soup Nazi revealed so much about them.
Speaking of revealing, the Chinese restaurant uncovers the absurdity of waiting. What other show could make an entire episode about nothing happening and have it be so captivating? because it was relatable. Everyone's been trapped in their own version of that restaurant, watching life pass while they're stuck on pause.
It was the absurdity of existence in a microcosm, a commentary on the human condition, all while waiting for a table.
It seems Seinfeld managed to hold a mirror up to society in the simplest yet most profound ways.
And in the end, isn't that the role of a comedian? To point out the emperor's wearing no clothes, or in this case, no soup for you.
All right, folks, let's dive into the deep end. Seinfeld's finale. Critics and fans split down the middle. Was it a stroke of genius, or did they drop the ball in the ninth inning? Thoughts?
Genius? Please. They ended up in jail, for heaven's sake. That's the punchline? Society's so twisted, we get a kick out of watching our heroes get caged. It's not about closure, it's about reflection, reflecting the absurdity of our societal norms.
Oh, George, lighten up. The finale was a bold move, a daring escape from the expected happy endings. It stayed true to the show's core, poking fun at the trivialities of everyday life, even in its final hour.
They should have ended up in a deli. At least we'd get a laugh out of the pastrami. Jail? What is this, a Marx Brothers movie? At least give Harpo a cameo as their cellmate.
You imagine if they had? The sheer, utter chaos, Harpo honking his horn, Jerry trying to do a stand-up routine, George scheming an escape plan with a piece of pastrami.
Man, you all got it twisted. It's not about where they ended up. It's about the journey, the laughs, the tears, and yeah, the frustrations too. That finale, it was raw. It was real. And ain't that the essence of life itself?
Real? Richard, my friend, life is absurd, but reality? That's a stretch. They turned societal critique into a sitcom, then slammed the door shut with a prison cell. It's ironic, it's fitting, but is it satisfying? Depends on who you ask.
Satisfaction in comedy is as fleeting as my love scenes with Desi. What matters is the uproar, the conversation it sparked. Isn't that the real triumph of any show?
Triumph or tragedy, it got us talking. And in the end, isn't life just one big joke with the punchline cut off?
Spoken like true jesters of our time. Through the laughter and the jail bars, Seinfeld left us pondering, debating, and most importantly, laughing. Here we are, still dissecting it like a frog in biology class. Let's jump into the ocean of catchphrases that Seinfeld has gifted pop culture. No soup for you, yada yada yada. What's the deal with these becoming so iconic?
It's simple, really. Language is a tool, a weapon, and sometimes a crutch. Seinfeld turned the everyday into the hilarious, and these catchphrases, they're shorthand for the absurdity we all live in. It's like we're all in this big, chaotic supermarket, and each catchphrase is another item on the shelf, reminding us not to take it all too seriously.
Man, you hit it. But there's something more, something deeper. These phrases, they resonate because they're real. They're what we're all thinking but too scared to say. No soup for you. That's not just about soup, man. It's about every time you've been denied something you really wanted. It's laughter in the face of rejection.
Oh, absolutely. It's the music of the moment, you know? Each catchphrase is like a note, and when you hit it just right, the whole world sings along. But the beauty of it, the real magic, is the way these phrases jump out of the screen and into our lives. They become part of our personal soundtracks. Yada 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 isn't just skipping the boring parts. It's the dance we all do to keep moving forward, dodging the bullets of boredom.
Speaking of bullets, whenever someone says yada yada yada, I feel like I've been shot with blanks. I mean, who needs to listen to the details anyway? But let's not kid ourselves. The real reason these catchphrases stick is because they're coated in that sweet, sweet veneer of shared misery and humor. It's all about the misery, folks. Misery loves company, and what better way to unite in our collective despair than through a catchphrase?
Oh, hold your horses, gentlemen. It's not all doom and gloom. These catchphrases, they're like little bursts of joy, little reminders not to take life too seriously. Seinfeld turned the microscope on the human condition, but it also showed us the comedy in our everyday tragedies. Each catchphrase is a lifeline, telling us it's okay to laugh at ourselves.
Strong words from a distinguished panel. So whether it's laughing at the absurd, finding unity in the shared human experience, or simply enjoying the comedic melody of life, Seinfeld's catchphrases have indeed carved a unique space in our cultural lexicon. And that's a wrap on catchphrases, folks. Let's pivot to what a Seinfeld reboot might look like in today's era, coming up next. Moving on to the elephant in the room, could we ever see a Seinfeld reboot in our modern digital age? Lucille, you've always been ahead of your time. What's your take?
Here's the thing, Bob. Given our hyper-connected world, Seinfeld today would be knee-deep in social media mishaps. Imagine George getting catfished, or Kramer going viral for all the wrong reasons. There's endless material, but the question is, can we keep the essence of Seinfeld without it turning into a farce of modern-day gimmicks?
Ha! Modern-day gimmicks? The show was already a farce of everyday gimmicks, just of its own time. What's the difference if now it's about Twitter instead of answering machines? It's all the same circus, just the clowns wear different makeup.
Could you imagine? Kramer starts a YouTube channel for his bizarre inventions. Elaine gets into feuds on Twitter. George tries to use Tinder and... oh, the humanity. But honestly, tapping into the absurdity of today's online culture while maintaining that classic Seinfeld cynicism, that's comedy gold right there. Though finding the human connection in the digital disconnection, therein lies the challenge.
And let's not overlook the obvious. Today, every Tom, Dick, and Harpo thinks they're a comedian online. The real question is, would Seinfeld's observational humor stand out in an age where everyone broadcasts their every mundane thought? Or would it be just another whisper in the cacophony? Don't get it twisted. A reboot could be something, but it's got to cut deep, not just play dress-up with today's trends. Seinfeld was never just about laughs. It was about pointing out the ridiculousness of social norms. Nowadays, norms are changing faster than you can tweet about them. So if you're asking if Seinfeld could survive today, shit, survival ain't enough. It's got to evolve.
Evolution, sure, but risking the original charm? That's the real gamble. Change too much and you lose what made Seinfeld special. Not enough, and it's irrelevant. It's like trying to reshoot I Love Lucy with a smartphone. Some things are best left untouched.
Ah, but therein lies the rub. The world keeps spinning and the absurdities keep mounting. What better source of endless material could you ask for? A Seinfeld reboot doesn't just have potential. Given the state of the world, it's practically a social necessity.
A compelling discussion, indeed. Whether Seinfeld should or shouldn't be rebooted in today's context, one thing is clear. Its legacy is unshakable, its influence undeniable, and the possibility of its return, well, that remains a tantalizing question mark. All right, folks, we've danced around, dug deep, and debated with the kind of fervor that only Seinfeld can inspire. Let's get those final thoughts. Richard, kick us off, will you?
Future generations, listen up. Seinfeld ain't just a show. It's a mirror showing us the goofy, awkward, downright bizarre faces of humanity. Find it, watch it, learn from it. It's teaching us to navigate this absurd world with a little laughter.
Let me paint you a picture. We're floating on a rock in space, pretending we've got it all figured out. Seinfeld. Now that's a crystal clear snapshot of the absurdity of our existence. It's a lesson in laughing in the face of life's cosmic joke.
Honestly, darling, Seinfeld broke the mold. It didn't just open doors, it kicked them down. For every comedian, every showrunner coming up, this was the playbook on doing it your own damn way. And for that, I'm eternally grateful.
Only Seinfeld could make an episode about nothing and turn it into something. It's like they took my mantra, I must confess I was born at a very early age, and turned it into a show. It's proof that you don't need a plot when you've got style.
You know, it's the laughter, the pure, unadulterated joy that Seinfeld brought into our living rooms. It was like lightning in a bottle, zapping us with happiness when we least expected it. If laughter is the best medicine, then Seinfeld was the pharmacy.
And I suppose it's my turn to wrap up. Seinfeld, through its trials, tribulations, and a whole lot of nothing, has carved out a unique niche in our cultural lexicon. It reminds us to find humor in the everyday, to embrace the quirks, and to celebrate the mundane. Thank you, panel, for your insights, your humor, and your spirited debate. Here's hoping our dialogue today has deepened your appreciation for a show that, whether we admit it or not, taught us to find and revel in the humor of our human condition. Good night.